Well, I'm really happy to be back with you, Mark. As we were talking about just moments ago, before we were recording, we had a really interesting conversation for the Trauma Recovery Summit. And it's always really exciting for me to get back in touch with those of you that I felt a strong connection to. Your mission is one that really interests me. I have a lot of curiosity about our conversation today, and I'm really excited for our audience to listen to this interview. We
Thank
are
you.
going to be,
Excited to be here.
yeah, yeah. We are
Hmm.
going to be talking about the emotional and spiritual journey to heal anxiety, depression, and addiction. Our guest today is Mark Brouwer. Mark is a spiritual teacher, a writer, and a speaker. He currently serves as the pastor of Bethel Church in Princeton, Minnesota. He's the director of Renew Resources, which provides teaching, retreats, and support for the leaders who struggle with anxiety, depression, or addiction. Mark is also the creator and director of Renewed Man Community, a 90-day boot camp for people who struggle with sexual compulsion or addiction. Mark has written 3 books, including Rise Above, Overcoming Discouragement in Challenging Times, and Leaving Your Mark Without Losing Your Mind. Mark, again, I'm so happy to be with you today.
Thanks. I'm excited to be here and looking forward to our conversation.
Yeah, me too. I would love it if you could give our listeners a little bit of background, your background, on what got you interested in these issues of anxiety, depression, and addiction.
Sure. So, I suppose, like so many of us, it's the twofold where it's dealing with things in our own life, and then in the process of dealing with them in our own life, we want to help others go through the same kind of thing. And for myself, so I've been a pastor. I went through graduate school or seminary after college, and then launched into church ministry pretty much right away. And so from an early age, I was connecting to people as a pastor, as a spiritual teacher, and obviously pretty quickly saw all the needs, right? And people would be asking questions and that sort of thing. And but the other part of it is that even though when I was growing up and in my early life, I considered myself, I thought of myself as a pretty laid back person and just sort of chill. I got married, we had kids, and now I'm pastoring this church, actually starting a new church. It was a church, we call it a church plant in Austin, Texas, and really feeling the pressure, and what I came to understand is that I don't think I came into adulthood with a lot of with the coping skills that I needed to have, to deal with the stress that I was under, to deal with the demands that were on me, and so I struggled. I struggled with anxiety. I struggled with an addiction of sorts, and I think of addiction almost like a continuum, that we're on the spectrum of addiction, right? And so then that over time, I started at a church in Austin, Texas. I was there for a number of years, then moved to Minneapolis, Minnesota. Started the church there, and anyway, this all came to a head for me in 2011 with addiction slash burnout experience, and then leaving the church and going into work with a person who ran a counselor, a psychologist who ran a program doing a lot of training about addiction and recovery. And so then I started working with him. But anyway, I'm going on a long time here about my background, but but again, because of these things playing in my own life, um, and then as I learned some things and went through things, then I actually ultimately became the director of training for this person. His name is Mark Laser, and that sort of um began a journey for me, like professionally or in my ministry or whatever. Of that's where I started writing stuff, ultimately writing books, leading seminars, and so now I've gone back into church work where I do that, and then I also do these other things that are really really tied to what I do as a pastor, but I'm doing it also for people outside of the church that I'm a part of.
I see. I I would love to just drop into this a little bit because I think you've touched on the stuff that many people will understand. And you talk about um, you said addiction slash burnout. Um, how do you see, and you also talked about how you felt ill-equipped for the pressure that was put upon you and that you didn't have the coping skills. So do you believe that we create ways of coping that can lead to addiction?
Oh yeah, absolutely,
Can you speak a
absolutely.
little more about that, please, if you would?
Yeah, I forget where it was I initially came across this, but someone talked about one of the key goals for parents as a parent is to help your kids learn how to self-soothe, um, and basically to deal with distress in a way that's healthy. And I had a good family. My parents were together. They had, but it was not a perfect family, and I was the youngest. And so there's different terminology for different kinds of upbringings that people have, and if you're familiar with that terminology, I was the classic lost child, where
Mm.
I was on my own a lot, and learned to sort of take care of myself by isolating and um, riding my motorcycle and doing stuff. Um, so so that would be that'd be how it played out in my life. That I, rather than learning how to deal with uh, things in a healthy way, I learned to deal with them by just kind of shutting down. And I also, I think I also grew up with, I would joke around and like to make people laugh, and so that became people pleasing codependency. I really wanted people to like me,
Mm.
and I wanted everyone to be happy. I wanted everyone to be having a good time. And boy, when you're leading an organization or leading a community, if that's what causes you comfort. If you're not comfortable unless everyone else is having a good time and in a good place, you're going to be stressed out all the time. And I was, right? Because there's always people that are unhappy about something, and then there's conflict in the church with different, sort of groups within the church. And so I just, I hadn't learned how to deal with that. So again, these are some of the things are unique to me, unique to my own situation, but people can relate to them, hopefully. The biggest thing for me, the turning point, uh, was really connecting to the teaching. I heard it through the Recovery 12-step community. It's an emphasis there, but came to an even deeper understanding of it through the study that I've been doing of Stoic philosophy. It's the whole Stoic philosophy of really getting clear about what you can control, sort of what's yours to manage versus what's beyond your ability to control. And in recovery, they talk about that, the serenity prayer: grant me, God, the serenity to accept the things I can't change, those things outside of my control. So that, as simple as that distinction is, for me, it has become huge in terms of my ability to manage the stress and manage the expectations, manage the projections that people have on me. There's a lot of that stuff that's sort of outside of my control, and so then I'm able to live more at peace. Um, and anyway, going back to your question, then how that relates to these other things, if you if you're not doing that, if in my case, if I'm having a hard time being okay with whatever's going around me, then obviously one of the ways that that plays out is high levels of anxiety, and then you're going to look for other ways to soothe, to comfort yourself, to distract yourself, right? Which is turning to food, sex, gambling, alcohol, whatever other drugs, whatever thing you're going to do. So I really see these as very closely tied together. And therapists would call these co-occurring disorders, right?
Mm.
And so, oftentimes, maybe always, I don't know, but there's something that's giving rise to that addiction.
Right.
And yeah,
I want to, I really appreciate your sharing at that level. I know that this is some of the most vulnerable stuff that we do as teachers. But one thing I want to honor you for is that your vulnerability is really the opportunity for people to hear and feel what it is like to go and walk this path of healing, right? But
yeah.
one of the things that I'm so interested in is the fact, would you say that you weren't really heard or seen as a child? You said the lost child. Would that be an accurate
I
way?
think that's, yeah, probably fairly accurate.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
And like, so others, like in my own experience, right? Um, and I really like to just take the blame off the parents because it's life.
absolutely.
It's
My
life, right?
parents were both very overworked.
Yeah, overworked, or, in my case, my father was dying, my mother left our family. These are the circumstances of life, right? So let's just try to get the blame game out of there.
Yeah,
So in the midst of that, you were the lost child. You were the child that, so what that means, or what I'm hearing you say, and please tell me where I'm wrong, is that lost child trying to find some meaning in life, some purpose? Like, if that child hasn't been seen, hasn't been heard, what is that child looking for? What were you
sure.
looking for?
Yeah. So, yeah, I suppose in my case and in the case of the typical lost child, it would be attention and affirmation and
Mm.
and validation, right? And then so people will that plays out in different ways. So then sometimes people would seek attention and whatever by acting out. Some people would seek that by being the clown, class clown. Some people would try to achieve that by achievements. And so the on the one hand, which is kind of what I did, went into the achiever mode, but which is fine on the one level, but in terms of what it does to a person's soul, and you discover this as you get older, is that well, wait a minute, so I'm achieving this stuff, and no matter what I achieve, it doesn't satisfy. It's not enough. It's not meeting that need, because obviously it's a deep inner need that nothing external is going to satisfy, right? And so that's where the issue of healing comes in. And so we're talking about these three things: addiction, anxiety, and depression. And in some ways, they're just random but related mental health disorders. They're probably the leading mental health disorders in our world today, in our society today, and they're related in a lot of ways. But therapists will say that, and psychiatrists will say that anxiety and depression are often, both sides of the same coin. They both occur together a lot. And because one of the things is, if you're running on a lot of anxiety and adrenaline, and then pushing yourself, you will often feel very depleted and then depressed. right? And another thing that happens with depression is people grow up trying to experience or trying to receive whatever they feel they need in terms of validation. And if I have this, if I get that, then it's going to fulfill me or it's going to satisfy me. And at a certain point, you find it's not enough. It never seems to be enough. Then um, then depression sets in, right? There's this saying, in terms of money, um, and people believing that getting more and more wealth will satisfy them. The saying is, the poor are happier than the rich. Um, no, the rich, yeah, the poor are happier than the rich because the poor still think that money can buy happiness, but the rich know better.
Mm.
And so that, beware of getting that thing that you always thought you wanted, because then when you get it, you realize that it doesn't fully satisfy. So,
Right.
yeah.
I'm curious as to, because being uh, someone that looks at life holistically, for those of us in our audience that are curious about this and understand that there is clearly some of these characteristics in their own life and their own experience, how do these show up? And for me, it was a physical thing. Like I had a physical response that really woke me up to, wow, I can't do this anymore. I can't do life like this. Can you speak to the ways that people would sort of go, my God, here it is, right? I've got to do something.
Well, yeah, and it shows up in a variety of ways. Um, for some people, it just is this continual sense of meaninglessness or emptiness. And oh, if we need to build a new house. Okay, we build the house. Now, okay, that still doesn't do it. I get a different job, and then so it's moving from one thing to another. And at certain points, when you stop, you realize something's not working here. And of course, the modern world, or postmodern world, or whatever that we're living in, it's really easy to find other things to distract ourselves. Certainly any kind of addictive substance or addictive activity, but even just media and TV and binge watching this and playing those video games and whatever that. So, but every now and then we'll hit the point where we're laying in bed at night and there's no other place to escape or distract ourselves, and then we're facing that, whatever. Some people it is a dramatic, let's say a burnout experience or something very physical. For some people, it's having to face that they have moved into addiction. That their use of something or whatever activity is unhealthy and it's damaging to them, and then the journey of recovery from that addiction forces them to deal with whatever's going on in their lives. And so, I've done quite a bit of work with people in recovery from addiction, and we have this saying. It's a little bit of a coarse saying, but I'll share it here, and that is that it's hard to stay sober if your life sucks.
Mm.
So that people will try really hard to get sober, right? And it's sort of like trying to push down you're like swimming and you've got a beach ball and you're trying to push down this beach ball. So you're trying to get rid of XYZ behavior. And you can do it if that's all you focus your attention on. But the minute you get tired or get distracted, you'll lose attention on this beach ball and you'll let go of it and it'll pop up again. And so that's why the journey of recovery, if it's going to be a long-term recovery, has got to involve looking at some of these other factors. And I suspect the same thing would be the case with anxiety and depression, that long-term recovery, from any mental health disorder is not simply about managing the symptoms. It's about, facing what's not working in my life. And, you know, I happen to believe that the spiritual existential issues of life are part of that picture for people. And so I, believe that's not all, but it is part of that healing journey.
Yeah. I see depression, anxiety, and addiction. That's how I'd line them up
Yep.
as brother and sisters. Not even
Yeah.
cousins, like they're brothers and sisters, I see them as. And I am really curious about what you just said as far as, just the spiritual beliefs and like what role does faith play in this healing journey? Can you speak to that a little bit, please?
Well, I think the most important thing to say, because again, I know that we have listeners who come from a variety of spiritual backgrounds and maybe even backgrounds of not embracing spirituality at all. So one of the things I want to say first off, I would direct people's attention back to the insights of Carl Jung,
Mhm.
one of the founders of modern psychology, and he was very aware of this. That he once said that of all the people that I have treated over the age of 35, he said there has not been one of them whose issue ultimately did not come down to developing a spiritual or religious outlook on life.
Mm.
In other words, he said for every one of them, the it and he means that in a broad way, that it comes down to uh, a sense of meaninglessness, or if we haven't somehow come to terms with, as he would put it, issues of ultimate concern, or um, he used the term religious outlook, but I think we might think of it more as kind of a spiritual outlook, some kind of connection to a higher power, right? Some kind of a connection to something greater than ours. And what he would say is that if that's not clear, then we're going to focus our energies on other things that are ultimately going to leave us unsatisfied, or leave us even more stressed out. So that's sort of the first place that I would get to, that all human beings, we have to find some way of connecting to something that's bigger than ourselves. Otherwise, nothing, all that we're going to have left then is what I would consider to be, or other people would say, is false substitutes for meaning and purpose. And again, beware of actually catching that thing you're chasing, because you'll realize that doesn't work either. That doesn't satisfy either. So that'd be the first part. And I come from a Christian background. I am a committed Christian. Um, and so, I would think of this as, Christianity would be a way that a lot of people throughout history have been able to come to meaningful answers to those spiritual questions, those existential questions. And it allows, it's a way of understanding your place in the world, and then understanding a connection to something greater than yourself. So if I could add just one other thing, with regard to this issue of this, meaning and the spiritual connection, the other part of it is relational connections as well.
Mm.
It's a connection to community, the connection to a tribe of some sorts. If you think about whatever your views are about the history of our ancestors, I happen to believe that history goes back a long ways, and our for many 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 generations, centuries, we existed as hunter gatherer tribes. And so it's just built into our DNA that we have a close community of people. Oftentimes it would be your family clan, and then some other people would constitute this tribe. And if you think about the fact that that's sort of programmed into our DNA to find, comfort and solace, meaning with this connection, now we live in the modern world, where many of us, we're very mobile, we're moving around. Maybe we have not a very great connection to our family, and we are, we are disconnected to a really meaningful, healthy, close tribe, and that's super dangerous. And therefore, if it's a healthy spiritual community, Christian community in my case, then that can really be helpful in a healing place.
Yeah. I think it's important to state here too, that this disconnection we talk about not only from others, but really primarily from ourselves in a
Mm,
process of being depressed, anxious, or addicted. That for me is something that I really always try to put out in the forefront, because really when you're talking about chasing anything, right, to soothe yourself, that was what I did. I was blaming it on others,
mm.
for not fulfilling my needs, for not filling me up, for not giving me that feeling that I yearned for. So I just wanted to sort of clarify that. Is that your belief too, Mark, as far as,
Yes, for sure, for
okay.
sure. So if you think about it, then one way of saying that would be um, that we need to have a healthy awareness of and connection to our own self, our true self, healthy and meaningful connection to others, to a tribe, and a healthy, meaningful connection to something that is beyond us, to the divine. You
Yeah,
know, and if any of those are lacking, um, yeah, we're toast.
we're toast. Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah. As we begin to wrap it up, we only have a time for a couple more questions. What are some of the most important things you would like to tell our audience right now?
well, one thing that I would say that I have learned in the past few years, and we haven't talked about this yet, but I think it'd be good to bring it into this discussion, is the importance and the place of our physical well-being as part of the recovery journey from addiction, depression, anxiety, from all of these, so that I have this program that I put together called the Renewed Man, and we focus on different keys of being a healthy person, and one of those is to develop physical well-being. Um, and we could go down into the weeds here, but I will just mention an author and it's a mindset or a shift in psychology and I guess to some extent psychiatry. And his name is Chris Palmer. He's a psychiatrist and he teaches. Well, he leads the postdoctorate and continuing ed for Harvard University, and so he has his belief is that there is a physical metabolic issue happening that it underlies mental disorders. And so again, I just would invite listeners to check out his work. His book is called Brain Energy, and it has to do with the mitochondria. Again, we're not going into the deep weeds, but one of the ways that I've seen that played out in my own life is, and many people will testify to this, that when they change their diet to something, and again, this is not about a particular diet. We're not going to get into the diet wars, but particularly getting away from sugar and highly processed foods. Um, One of the things that they'll find is uh, mental change, better mood, more energy, thinking more clearly, even depression and anxiety symptoms lessening. There's something to this connection to our from our physical life to our emotional life, and the same thing is the case in terms of a connection that happens with some kind of physical movement, how that impacts us in terms of our mental and emotional well-being. So we have a saying in this men's group that I run that I exercise if it makes any difference in my physical life. That's a bonus because I really exercise for my mental health.
Mhm.
Um, there's really strong research now about that connection. So I do think I've rambled a little bit and forgot your original question, but I wanted to bring that in as
Yeah.
part of this healing journey as well.
Yeah, no, I asked you about, what would you consider some of the most effective methods to move through depression, anxiety, and addiction?
Yeah. So, well, then certainly community. Community is key. Um, and then second would be somehow coming to clarity about coming to peace with some spiritual connection, your place in the world, your connection to, I would say, God, your connection to the divine, and then physical. So I would actually put those in that order in terms of the connection, because the wild thing is a lot of times it's through those personal connections that's really helps us in terms of our spiritual connection, and then the physical well-being. Maybe it's just it's uniquely important today because we have a unique problem today, in that A, our food supply is really messed up, and B, many of us are very, very sedentary in how we live. And both of those can be very damaging, or are very damaging, not only physically, but also mentally,
Yeah,
emotionally.
yeah. Mark, I want to thank you so much for talking to us about this. It has been a really enlightening conversation with you, as it always is. For our audience, I'd just like to recap this conversation. We explored the various components of healing, faith, and belief's role in the process. We discussed how to approach these issues respectfully, what some of the biggest challenges to healing are, and how to create a safe and supportive environment for individuals. Finally, we discussed some of the most effective methods for dealing with these issues and how spiritual understanding can help others heal. You're going to find all of Mark's information in our show notes. We really appreciate your being here. Let's do it again soon. Always a pleasure to be with you, Mark. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciated the chance to talk, and I'm looking forward to having a time where I'm going to be able to interview you, Sarah, with all that you've learned and all that you do in your work.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you.